Welcome to the Stepping Away from the Noise YouTube channel. Today's episode of Let's Go to the Oratory is blessed with the pleasure of having a special guest to talk with us, my friend Chris. He has been a blessing in my life and a source of inspiration. He has accomplished many wonderful things with the Lord, and I hope you will be blessed with Chris's presence as well. Welcome, Chris. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me for this.
Before we dive deeper into our conversation, let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit. We thank you, Lord, for being with us today. We ask you to forgive us for all our sins and all the things we have neglected to do. We ask that you bless us with your grace, fill us with your Spirit, and lead us to do all that is good and holy, to do your work, to be your hands and your feet in this world, to be empathetic and compassionate. Help us to remain faithful and hopeful, and to radiate your love and mercy. We thank you for this podcast and for all gathered here listening in today. Please bless all of our listeners. Please bless Chris and I and all of our families and friends and the people we care for. Enrich our souls with your holy grace. Please live in us. Thank you, Lord, for the blessings and graces you have given us and will give us. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm just fine, thanks. Once again, thank you for inviting me for this.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really excited that you're open to doing this.
Well,
Um,
it's a little daunting because it's a tricky subject to talk about. It doesn't get talked about enough, and a lot of stuff you think maybe it should be private, and other things I realize from her there's a lot of people who are having issues, and maybe it helps to actually say a lot more about it. So maybe
yeah.
it's sharing this is going to be doing a lot of good for other people, even if it's kind of, freaking me out right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for being here. I'm really grateful for your presence, and I hope that everyone is blessed by your presence because I think you're a pretty inspiring person.
Thank you. That's kind of overwhelming. I wouldn't call myself inspiring, but it's just, I just do what I can.
Thanks for being here, Chris. I was just wondering if you could share with our listeners anything that's going on in your life right now that you feel either God's calling you to or something you're struggling with or anything you're excited about that our
Uh,
listeners would be thrilled to hear about or
okay.
that it could help them grow in their faith.
Well, I think, shall I introduce myself to those who don't know me then?
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Well, my name is Chris Chan. I'm a lifelong Milwaukeean. Right now, I have got a doctorate in U.S. history from Marquette University. And right now, my main job is teaching history online, and I also for graduate students. And I also teach for other places. I teach political science and sometimes information science as well. I also have a master's in information science.
Wow.
So am also a writer. I write mystery stories, including a number of stories for the Sherlock Holmes themes publisher MX Publishing. I also write the mystery series, the Thunderberg and Kaiming mysteries about private investigators who help young people in trouble, and they work with the school and help the students with all sorts of crises. And I think there's in the Funderburk and Kaiming stories, I've introduced an autism subplot where some of the characters, including a ch younger child, a teenager, and adults, because I wanted to study diagnosis at different stages of life. In the third book, a whole lot of them are diagnosed with autism, not the main characters, but people they love. So the daughter of one character, the little brother of the same character, and her adoptive parents.
Wow.
So it's a case where I thought it was something to explore, and I do it a lot more in the fourth book that'll be coming out in a few months. But I thought I wanted to incorporate that into my work. And the book that I've written one book on autism in the media called The Autistic Sleuth,
Mm.
because I'm a big fan of mysteries. And I realized years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, that there were a lot of um, fictional detectives who were being portrayed as being on the autism spectrum. And I did some looking around online. It turned out a lot of autism forums, there were a lot of characters who I didn't expect. Think about it first, but there are a lot of mystery fans who said that, he seems autistic. And so I would spend I drew up a list and found about 24 characters and discovered that until very recently, almost none of these shows actually address them as having autism.
Wow.
It's only and it's based in Europe too, and Europe and South Korea are the ones that mostly identify them as having autism. Where a character, for example, one of the most famous, Dr. Temperance Brennan on Bones, is widely viewed as being a woman on the autism spectrum, and yet it's as I call it, it's like the word that cannot be named.
Yeah.
The word autism is never used. In fact, there's never with them Bones and a lot of other characters, there's never any attempt to diagnose that person.
Wow.
It's like there's oh, he or she is just quirky, and that's just who they are. And sometimes the treatment is to speak to them very, very, very sternly and say, or to blame them for a meltdown or freak out or rigidity.
Mm.
Whereas, or they simply may have some close friends who accept them and love them for who they are, but they never try to do anything really about it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, on the show Sherlock, Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes there's the word Asperger's is used once in reference to his attitudes, his behavior, and then it's never brought up again.
Wow.
Good to look at it. It's just that who are these characters? How are they presented? And you look at different ways their romantic lives are presented, how they work with others, and how they deal with everything. And so I just thought it's a case where, you've got all these screenwriters. My personal theory is that a lot of them knew that they must have known someone on the autism spectrum who was
Mm.
very smart, and they often say, screenwriters often turn to the smartest people they know when they want to write smart.
Yeah.
So they came up with, so a couple years ago, after all, it was very difficult for me to write because, and I'm going to go into this, when I talk or write about autism a lot,
Mm.
I can start to get overwhelmed and I can start to melt down.
Yeah.
And that's why if I start speeding up my speech here, or if I seem to go some things up, but please, 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 let me know. But it was a case where I could write for maybe half a page or so,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would have a great big meltdown with my heart pounding,
Oh,
and I'd be in total sweats, and the room would be spinning. So a
goodness.
book that I had hoped to finish in a couple of months took me years and years that were spaced out. So
Yeah.
I finally and now that it turns out that I finally got published, and now I'm thinking because in the just less than 2 years since it came out, I'm finding all these other new detectives coming out from a
Mm.
British show called Ludwig to Elsbeth to the Dexter Resurrection are all have these detectives who are clearly on the autism spectrum.
Mm.
And so there's going to be a lot more to write about when it comes to them. So I'm
Oh,
thinking I just might wait another 4 or 5 years and write another book on that. So,
yeah, that sounds like a
probably.
good idea.
But one of the the introduction to the book is actually a speech I gave for the the American, well, not American, the Society of G.K. Chesterton has its annual conference, in different places every summer, and so about I believe it was 2022, they had a conference in Milwaukee, and I presented on how, and I can go into this more later, the my role of Chesterton autism, because the Catholic apologetics author G.K. Chesterton, a lot of people think he may have been on the autism spectrum.
Mhm.
And so I wrote about my own experiences and talked about how his Father Brown mysteries, when I read them in middle school, seventh grade, were pivotal in helping me interact with people because I should point out I was not diagnosed with autism till the year, because let me see here, because I must have been about 28 or 29.
Mhm.
So that was quite, I was all grown up then, and I
Yeah.
believe me, I could really have used the diagnosis in childhood and adolescence, because when you
Mhm.
think that perhaps you're going crazy, is there something seriously wrong with you?
Yeah.
It helped to have a name for it.
Yeah, I was diagnosed as an adult as well. Just in
Right.
like 2022, I think it was. So not too long ago. And yeah, it would have made life a lot different. But now that we know, if we were hard on ourselves, we can like take it all back in a way because we're like, you know what? I was working really hard and I had a lot to deal with and I did my very best. Looking back, I think I did my very best and I gave so much energy. And you thought, well, I shouldn't be so hard on myself because if I would have known. But
Right.
yeah.
And once again, like, yeah, he's talking about, autism being on a spectrum, but I think that one of the things that, because now, I mean, as I said, when I was growing up, there simply wasn't an autism diagnosis other than, having extremely limited, vocal, verbal abilities sometimes, and it's really only been, a few years before I was diagnosed that they started to expand the diagnosis.
Hmm.
And really, I was one of the last people to get the Asperger's diagnosis officially, because just months after I got it, they started to get rid of Asperger's diagnosis and replace it with autism spectrum disorder. And we can, I've got issues with the use of the term disorder, as
Hmm.
well as I've talked about that a lot in my book. But it's a point to raise, and it's just knowing that you are not mentally ill. Your brain just works differently from other people,
Right.
and just the reasons why. And I will go into this a lot more when we talk about church and everything like that. The idea of location, setting, stimulus, what sets you off in different ways,
Hmm.
and just the idea of overstimulation.
Yeah.
It's an absolute, well, it's an absolute challenge. So, well, going back to my lecture at for the Chesterton Society of G.K. Chesterton, I was talking about all these issues, like how in the Father Brown mysteries, he uses a psychological tactic to catch murderers and criminals, because he's able to put himself into the mind of others. And I mean, again, 13 years old when I first read them. My whole life, I had trouble understanding what other people thought. And so I spent a lot of time trying to follow Father Brown's tactics and understanding other people. And I can't say I got it exactly right, but it was an incredibly useful exercise in trying to understand what made a person who confused me tick, what they did, why they did, not to impose my own big question mark on them.
Mhm.
And I can't say it got right away, but starting in, eighth grade when I'd really honed it, it just made a night and day difference for me. And I think it's been incredibly important for me. Chesterton and two other mystery writers, Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, in other ways really helped me use the tactics to interact with people, my environment, including hyper observation on my part, comparing that with Sherlock Holmes, who is portrayed a lot these days as being on the autism spectrum,
Yeah,
and using Agatha Christie to help me organize observational skills and logic, reactions, understanding why other people act as they do, why people may lie, catching. I had to turn to mystery short stories and novels to help me figure out how to respond to people. And it was, there was no book to tell me how to do it. There was no therapy. There was no mystery therapy. It was just something I came up with on my own, and I don't know if it was always successful, but I found very helpful.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. So anyway, and as part of so I wrote the speech and delivered it, and just into the first chapter, the intro chapter of my book, and I also around this time started coming up with ideas on how to, because knowing my own problems that came with going to mass and church and everything, and I wound up writing a pamphlet called I think of things to know about, I think 10 or 12 things to know about people, parishioners with autism, that it was sent that had been being used, but it was sent to the Milwaukee Archdiocese, and I started trying to get a support email group going, and I've also been included that in the appendices of the Autistic Sleuth.
Mm.
And so I guess I've been trying to reach out, and someone must have liked it because a few couple years ago, not to brag, but I received the Temple Grandin Award. This was given to people with autism who have done something notable, and I was one of the winners a couple of years ago.
That's great.
So I think that I think that I know this, I've been kind of, I'm not directing your question head on, but I've just been trying to introduce myself.
Yeah,
So,
that's okay. I was gonna say how we met was you had an interview with the Catholic Herald and
hmm
talking about how you were working on um helping the parishes learn more about autistics and so I got in contact with you because I had just been diagnosed and I was trying to, you know, get help because I'm like, like I was trying to figure out this and so I thought, well, you're Catholic and you're in the church, maybe you can help me, and because I just felt like I wasn't getting the help I needed from church. Like I had a very deep conversion and so my experience was very moving and but I had lots of overwhelm. I remember right before my diagnosis, a few like about 2 months before I got diagnosed, it was winter and I had just been shoveling for 2 hours in the bright light and I went to mass and the sound system was way too loud. And I started like having a meltdown, but I didn't know what was going on. And I was so overwhelmed and I just wanted to cry. And I was holding it in. And after mass was done, I was walking out of the church with my friend and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, I was just bawling. I was crying and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. I was like, I'm just so overwhelmed. Like, it was just so loud in there. And so, that was kind of like, I think that was like one of the first times that I realized, like, I always thought it was like something with me, that something like the devil was attacking me, or, I didn't know what it was. But then when this happened, I thought, this is something outside of me. This is like a sensory thing. And so I was trying to figure it out. And so then when I got diagnosed, and I learned about my sensory needs, I was like, oh my goodness. And like, I was like, wow. So that's when, my therapist, she was like, well, you can get ear protectors or earplugs, or you can get sunglasses, and she gave me like all these different tips to help. But, going to mass with a lot of um, your tools to keep you sane. Um, Sometimes people find it distracting, like fidget toys or something.
Right.
But it's like, you got to do what you got to do to get through it. And if someone's going to judge you, it's not about that because you're there to worship God and, you know, so it's like you got to do what you got to do. And sometimes it's too overwhelming to even go. And so it's better to stay at home and attend mass online if you can. But being in church is always better. But if you feel you're gonna have a meltdown, maybe you should just like maybe it's better to have someone bring you communion. But there's another that's another thing too. And then I'll let you we'll get back to you. But I had someone bring me communion for like once a week, and the lady they were sending wore a lot of perfume and a lot of makeup, and she was very loud and very like she was very excited, and it was like I was getting migraines every time she left. Like it would be within a half hour, it would just get triggered, and I'm just like, why am I feeling so sick? Why am I getting these migraines? And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's because she's coming here with her makeup, her perfume, her noise, and it's like too much. It's like defeating the purpose of, you know, having that peaceful relaxation and, connection with the Lord. It's like, so I had to like stop having her come, and I felt really bad. And I tried to like explain to her because I know a lot of elderly people have sensory ne needs too, even
Yes.
if they're not on the spectrum. And so I'm like, it might be something to consider, not putting so much on. And I said it in a really nice way, and she kind of seemed offended, but I was like,
Yeah.
well, so yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things where you realize that not only can you not adjust your reactions, but you can't make everybody around you change to suit your own reactions. So sometimes it's very it's like I said, it can be, let's call it it's a special form of social awkwardness where
Mhm.
you can't function if something's not sort of in, let's call it the sweet spot zone for you.
Yeah.
But it's at the same time, there's no way to adjust all these random variables
Yeah.
because I think, as I said, when I was, it's like if I was, growing up today as a kid, I mean, I would probably have been diagnosed with autism much earlier
Mhm.
because I have, all the symptoms, the reactions, and I think that, everything, I would get reactions in busy crowd places,
Mhm.
but church and mass was something different, and I would get in some ways not just a full body overstimulation, but I think it went into my soul as well. But growing up, I was raised more non-denominational Christian,
Mhm.
and never got the same level of extreme, head to toe, every brain cell, every nerve in your body overstimulation in a Protestant church or anywhere else that I did in a Catholic church. And I said, make of that what you will.
Well,
But it's,
I think because the, my uncle, when I was coming into the church, he said, you know, um, all our senses are being affected. You have the scent, you have, the candles and like the smells and the touch and like everything, like all our senses are being used at mass. so that's probably why it's triggering everything.
Right. And I think, it's again, everything, people, everything, but there's something, and again, just the idea, fire, whether it's the candles, and sometimes, as can't understand it, but it just happened just on fr Thursday when I went, when I was at the church, and I think I had just sometimes there were about, less than a dozen other people there was adoration.
Mhm.
But the feeling is so strong that sometimes you get the feeling that the great big church is shaking, that you
Mm,
have the feeling that the walls are going to close in on you any moment,
mm,
and the huge vaulted ceiling of the church is going to come down on you at any moment.
mhm.
And that's why, I was there, briefly for a confession and for the Eucharist, but I had to get out of there quick as I can because I just was getting the feeling that, earthquake coming.
Yeah.
And just I think because one of the things, when I was a graduate at Marquette, I would try to go to Mass at least once a week while I was there. And one of the problems was that one of the physical responses is that I would get extreme stomach upset.
Mm.
And it's the idea of always running away at a moment's notice because you have to rush to the bathroom and without going to details, barely getting there in time. I
Yeah,
think
I
my
understand.
yeah, again, I don't. It's just like that's one of the things too, because more often than not, I watch the mass, and I often have to pause and rush to the bathroom because
Yep.
just all of a sudden, I just suddenly get so overwhelmed that I can lose control of everything, and I just, I have to address it right away. So that's why, I have to time everything right when I do something because often I can be so wound up afterwards, 2 or 3 hours, I can't sleep. I can't focus on my work. I'm
Mhm.
almost feel dizzy.
Yeah.
And it's just,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
remember there was a few times when I had was just going to mass by myself when I first converted, and I was just having anxiety and just panicking, and I'm just trying to pray like over and over, like Jesus, I trust in you, and just trying to get myself through it. And there would be times where like the priest was like the only thing in focus and everything else was blurry.
that
And
it
yeah,
just how it can be with me. So
yeah,
certain objects are in focus and others blurry. It's amazing. I've never heard anyone else say it like that before, but
yeah, yeah.
thank you for.
And like you said, with feeling like everything's gonna close in, I remember I was at one parish and I was with my grandma and we were sitting in the back because she liked to sit in the back.
Mhm.
And I like to sit in front because then I don't have all these distractions around me and I can focus on the altar, focus on the tabernacle, focus on Jesus, and the priest. And so we were sitting way in the back and this one time and it was a very big church and there wasn't a lot of people there. And I just all of a sudden had this horrible feeling like everything was just gonna close in on me. And so I know how you feel. It's just like, oh my gosh, and you think you're supposed to have a peaceful experience here. And I've had so many wonderful experiences, but it's really nice to be able to relate with you in the experiences that have been like, I don't know if traumatizing is the right word. Um, but
I wouldn't call it traumatizing so much as terrifying sometimes because
yeah.
it's an odd thing because I can feel so much something so intense. And
Hmm.
it's just, it's a case of because I think that one of the issues is that it was very strong, strong when you're a kid and your brain's developing,
Hmm.
and adolescence. Oh boy, when you're going through puberty and everything, just everything goes wacko.
Yeah.
And then, college, things were a little settled down, not as bad, still, but still intense, and still didn't understand it. And then around a couple, started grad school, but when I was just about 24, I had serious migraines,
Mm.
which completely changed my brain chemistry.
Mm.
It's just they were intense. I was on medication,
Mm.
and it messed me up physically and mentally for years.
Mm.
I mean, it blunted all of my reactions. I never was able to, it took me about 10 times the effort to think, to doing homework, to read a book, took 10 times, or at least maybe 7 or 8 times the effort
Mm.
to finish a book, the time and everything. That's why I could barely finish my doctorate work until because I spent years thinking like this is my life now. I just felt like my head was always wrapped up in like thick gauze,
Yeah.
and that I was just no. It took my memory was shot,
Mm.
my cognitive ability was a fraction of what it used to be.
Yeah.
Then around with about a year to go before I had to finish my doctorate or be kicked out of the program.
Mm.
I saw a job listing for a history teacher at my former high school, and my former high school, USM, is that and my house are the only two places in the world where I feel like really comfortable, or at least
Okay.
really functional, because I get overstimulated a lot at school,
Mm.
but it's the only place in the world where I've been really outside my house, where I've been extremely functional and
Mm.
extremely happy, and it's just that's why I've been for years trying to go back because that's my best. It's how my best mindset. But it's like
Wow.
this is when the miracle happened. I applied for the job, and for a month afterwards, I suddenly it's like something got my. You can talk about neuroplasticity.
Mm.
The idea and that's the idea that all these pathways in my brain where suddenly all these neurons I thought were dead were coming back to life because I wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 hours at night. I'd be so excited about the possibility of teaching at USM.
Mm.
And then it's like something happened. Something got me going, and it was coming back to life after I feel like a big chunk of my brain was dead for a while.
Mm.
And when I didn't found out a month later I didn't get the job, I was devastated. But I also knew that I think I'm healing. And so, I mean, I'd spent years trying to get my dissertation done, and I was going nowhere. Everything I wrote was garbage. It
Mm.
was just, I had no pride in it. And all of a sudden, I was gaining my abilities back, and I had to work really, really hard trying to put every sentence together.
Mm.
But after a year of this intense focus, focusing on my doctorate and realizing I was getting better, it was like a 9 day difference. I wouldn't say because I'd gone from maybe what I'd call 40% of cognitive ability back to about 85%. And then the few years after that, did more work in getting back to normal. And I think by the time, after another 5 years, 6 years or so, I felt like I'd finally regained all the abilities I'd lost. But,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where too, for a long time, like I would go to mass at Marquette, and I wouldn't feel as much. But one of the things was it helped to go to the smaller location. There's the St. Joan of Arc Chapel, if you've ever been there. Very small
I've
place.
seen it on the outside.
Yeah. Well, it's a smaller place, and so I would go there around noon some days because it would just be easier. A smaller, darker place, not
Mm-hmm.
as much stimulation. Sometimes only about another dozen people there, sometimes more, but it felt a little more comfortable in ways there weren't. But it's
Mm-hmm.
something else I learned where I could, big places would knock me out, but I
Yeah.
often tried to go to the Chapel to Milwaukee Catholic home where I could have more on the isolated place on the balcony or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the idea of helping, and I've got a lot of help from because I wasn't received into the church till I was about 33, but I've got
Mm.
a godmother who's been really helping me out with
Good.
this. So it's just I had a lot. The priest who brought me into the church just did a great job listening and helping, and I think it's just I really do think that it's a a big challenge
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes, but at least I feel like it's a subject that isn't studied, and I feel like I'm the guinea pig, and when I figure out what I'm doing, where I'm
Yeah.
going.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that when you were talking about the small chapel and how that was a better experience for you, um, that was something I absolutely loved about when I was in the convent, because we had that small chapel and everyone was spaced out. Nobody was on top of each other, like there was like nobody had to shake hands during the sign of peace. You just did a little wave and like everybody had their own space and I really loved it. And when I was in the convent, that was before my diagnosis. And so all these little things that I can look back now and see, um, it just makes a lot more sense now. But anyways, I after I was sent home from the convent, my parish used to have mass at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays, and they would have adoration all day, and then they would close the adoration and then have the mass. And they'd also offer confession before mass. And I started going to the adoration and it was so wonderful because it was in a smaller chapel. They did some renovations and it like the church that was in the school was beautiful, but they decided to like turn the church into a gym and the gym into the chapel. And so I
Mm.
was conflicted about that. I didn't think that was the best choice, but it is what it is. And the chapel was small. So the 6 p.m. mass I used to start going to, um, my friend and I would sit way in the back where the lights were turned off. And there was about 10 people spaced out throughout the whole little chapel. And the only music was us making voice, when we'd sing, that was like the only, music. And everything was just peaceful and a lot easier to like take in and really like get deep into prayer by like not having all these distractions. And yeah, I really miss it. They stopped doing the 6 p.m. mass when COVID hit and then afterwards they just never brought it back. So for me, going to masses in the evening is a lot better. And I like going to like the smaller masses. Um, I find like the morning masses are very, very hard for me. Like I'm in the restroom a lot. You know, like my body's weak. And so by the end of the day, I'm stronger and I'm more stable and things are more, good. And so for me, like afternoon, evening is the best time for mass, best time for everything when it
Yeah.
comes to like adoration or anything. And it's a really big challenge because so many times they have wonderful things going on, but it's always early in the morning or, too early for, my schedule. And yeah, so that's been kind of my conflict. But yeah, the small chapels and like the more intimate weekday masses seem to be a lot better for me.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with it because I think for a lot of times it's timing is everything. Because you wake up sometimes it just takes me, if I'm especially if I haven't slept well and I often have trouble sleeping. But it's the idea of trying to get ready to address all these things. It's like first thing, the more it's like my brain doesn't function as well as it could, so certain reactions can be incredibly strong, and it certainly takes more and more time to do this or that or what have you.
Hmm.
And so sometimes, that's why my hours are irregular. And I think that I'll go into this in a sec, but it's just the idea of, as you say, sometimes, you have to find something like in the evening or afternoon because early morning doesn't work for you or something like that. So you just have to find a way to bend something to your own best best skill set or how you're it's just because like I said, it's sort of like one of the things about autism or neurodivergence is that not only don't of all the many things, whether it's temperature, sound, and a visual smell, it's not just that. It can also be time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that one of the problems that may face a whole lot of people with autism is that sometimes the 9 to 5 schedule
Yeah.
is the best. That's why, why is it sometimes I do my best work late at night or in the a, or from 2 to 4 a.m. sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's just a case, and some because one thing is too, sometimes when it's totally dark outside, you don't have to worry about the phone ringing. You don't worry, but sometimes the idea of when things are dark outside, but you're in your home, it's less stimulation.
Yes.
You so it's a case of sometimes, that makes you a night person because,
Mm-hmm.
it's because. As I was, I'm going to tell you, you brought up COVID, and I'm glad you did because I was going to. Because I think, 2018 and 19, right before COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
I was at my best. I was substitute teaching at USM. I was focusing on all these and I felt like I was mentally doing all right. And though I was certainly receiving plenty of reactions, they weren't as debilitating as they might have been at other times.
Mm-hmm.
And then lockdown.
Yeah.
And just the idea of, when you're already having trouble interacting with other people,
Mm-hmm.
I think that what the people in charge of these health regulations didn't realize is that it's kind of like people think of exposure therapy
Mm.
to help you with things. But when your behavior is being rewired to 6 feet away, don't touch. And when you have enough trouble breathing, it is. And like I said, one of the problems wearing a mask is sometimes when you have trouble breathing, the
Yeah.
smell of the KN95, everything,
Yeah.
it sets you off. And when you can't breathe deeply, it makes it so much harder to be out in public for more than 10, 15 minutes tops for me, and I've often had to wear that for hours at a stretch, and it
Yeah.
just wasn't something that was healthy for me mentally. But we can debate, exactly why it happens. But the idea of, again, the idea of don't touch people, care. It's just all these things where all of a sudden where you try to train your brain all these years to not freak out other people, and suddenly the government regulations say, everybody else is a source of contagion, and you must so view everybody else with fear. And so when you don't have interactions with other people other than your close family,
Mm-hmm.
when your settings are limited mostly to your house, you know, it, I think that lockdown rewired my head, and I think with some of my issues, family members I mean, we haven't gone to full pre-pandemic mode like other people have.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as I hate having to wear the mask, I have to wear masks more often than other people and other issues. But it's a case of I simply cannot. It's like I've found that, my stimulation is so much higher than it was back in 2019.
Yeah.
The idea that when you bump into someone, I found I used to have no trouble walking down the street of a residential neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly the sound and vibrations of a car zooming by suddenly caused a freak out that I
Yeah.
couldn't believe. The idea is that certain it's like everything is much more so since lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Smells are more intense.
Yeah.
Sights are more intense. Whether it's just something, certain color, certain sound, something that a dog has done on the ground as you walk. Anything that can set you off, whether
Yeah.
it's the sound of it, and it's like it's harder and harder for me to interact with people too. I mean, I rarely had problems, and then there's this one time when I was at a social gathering on a quiz night when I totally shut down, and I don't know why. This was 2019, right before the pandemic.
Mm.
And I've been trying to understand it because for some reason I completely shuddered
Mm.
and couldn't function. And that was the worst shutdown I'd had in years.
Wow.
And then, and now, since the pandemic, shutdowns are common. It's very
Yeah.
hard for me to go more than a few minutes in, any conversation. It's, even with someone I know very well, I
Mm.
have to really fight. But strangers are worse. But the
Yeah.
idea of a shutdown,
Yeah.
the idea of, meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnouts are all different, and I don't necessarily have to define them. But last 1 year ago, I was getting 3 meltdowns a day.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And they were not easy meltdowns. They were the kind of meltdowns that completely fried me mentally and physically.
Yeah.
And it slowed me down because once you have a full meltdown, I couldn't do any work. I couldn't write. I couldn't focus on grading for often 2 to 3 hours afterwards. So my schedule was badly messed up. It was complete, but it was a case of I don't, and I've been working on all these tactics so to bring down the meltdowns, and now I'm not having the meltdowns the same way. But at the same time, it's been harder for me just to leave the house. I
Yeah.
said going to the church just 3 days ago. Suddenly, I realized, holy cow, was that an
Yeah.
intense reaction, and I just don't understand just how severe it was, but it was severe.
Yeah, I know I kind of run through my head because I've had some friends invite me to adoration or something, and I live farther away now than I was at, my parish. So the travel time, I have to take that into account
Yes.
and the preparation beforehand, so we have to leave earlier to get there and so I run through all these things in my head and I think, am I going to be able to handle that? And like from A to Z, and you think like, well, if this person's there doing and they're the musician, then I'm going to have a meltdown. And if these other people are there, then I'll be fine. So it's just it's too many variables and if you're like you said, if you have a meltdown your emotions, your body, everything's just like wiped out. And you need that time to get restored. And I've been finding that like a lot of times just like one day of running errands and like going shopping or whatever we have to do, like it takes like 3 days sometimes to get recovered from that. And so, like, my friend had invited me recently to adoration, and I had to decline because I was sick. And it was just like, that, like, being with Jesus and going to adoration is like my absolute favorite thing. And I used to work at a parish school, and before and after my shift, I would stop in the chapel, and the lights were out, and it would just be me, maybe one other person in there and I would just pray and be totally at peace. I mean, I was struggling internally, but being at church in the silence is like very peaceful. And the lights were out, so and this for me, smelling the candles, I don't have problems with like the scent of the candles or the burning flame. I don't have issues with that. I have more issues with like if you go to mass and there's like people with perfume or people with makeup or cologne or the noise or the temperature if it's too cold like shooting on you, the air conditioning, so it's a lot of different things, but anyways, I feel like I got off path, but
No, this is, if I
okay.
may say, this is,
Yeah.
you are bringing up something that I was going to, because the
Mhm.
idea that it's been, the last couple of years, I have not been going out as much nearly as much as I used to. In fact, this winter I went almost 2 months without leaving the grounds of the house from January to early March and
Wow.
had to do more. But it's I think when I've been going out, it's just the idea car rides, the longer the car ride, the more challenging it is.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea of when you talk about dealing, it's because, I find more and more, a lot of people have tactics, and you talked about fidget toys and everything, and sometimes it's everything. But one of the other things is that I have to be very careful about what I bring with me because I'm always afraid of losing something, or so I have to be very careful of what I keep with me. And even if it's something small like just one thing that doesn't mean anything to me, I get upset if I lose something because once time I recently last year I went out and I felt lost a package of tissues, and
Hmm.
even though it's just tissues, it
Yeah.
caused it already been overstimulated because there was a lot of loud music at the venue and the positioning. So it just got to me. And
Yeah.
so some people, say that they can put on earbuds or earphones, and I hear that helps a lot of people. But as I said, I can't because, if I have something distracting me,
Mm.
it's like my mind, growing up, I would try to distract myself by mentally playing music and things like that. And when I said I would almost walk in front of a car or something.
Oh,
So
geez. Yeah.
it's like it's just because it's a case where hyper awareness of your situation
Yeah.
burns you out, but at the same time, you need to be aware of everything.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could, get injured or worse, and it's
Yeah.
just the case of you need it. So that's why I think for after decades, this isn't so bad too. Find myself, I used to go downtown every day when I went to Marquette. Now the idea, the bus, the downtown, the noises of downtown suddenly this is going to be way more than it ever was,
Yeah.
and it's absolute. And as you say, it can take days when because I don't. I think I need to use more descriptions to help because a lot of people who may not have autism or may not be familiar with autism will think, "Oh, well, you're just being over dramatic. You need."
No.
It's the idea of your
Yeah.
fainting couch. And it's when you talk about needing days to recover,
Yeah.
I think it's not just a matter of people say, "Oh, you're just being neurotic," or "You're just being," it's you're just you're just you're being scared,
Yeah.
and it's the idea of being. For me, it's like when you're overstimulated, it's very hard to think.
Yes.
My job includes a lot of thinking,
Yeah.
the helping students, when I do writing, when I edit and
Yeah.
everything. And the idea is too much information. When you're picking up everything from the crowds of hundreds of people walking by you, the sounds of the downtown streets, the horns honking, the beeping, the sound, the smells of
Oh,
exhaust.
the smells.
Yeah. And it is quite simply even after you come home, you don't settle down right away. It's
No.
like the gyroscope or the top. It's spinning as fast to keep it, but then, it starts wobbling and then it collapses.
Yeah,
It's
and
just,
then even if, even if you're not home alone, then you have everyone in the house making noise or doing something that could trigger it. That that like if your cup is so full and you're so overwhelmed, just one little thing that normally wouldn't bother you would, and it would just take you over and you're in full-fledged meltdown
right.
or shut down or
And,
yeah.
and to the people who don't understand what the idea of these autistic reactions are, because, picture this. Let's say that you got a nose full of bus fumes that set you off when you were downtown.
Yeah.
And let's say just because the fumes have dissipated, you're far away from where it happened, you are still smelling the fumes through memory. You're
Yeah.
still hearing the honking, the shouting, everything. And it's like you can feel it's so like your presence of, maybe there's a person asking you for money on the street and something. So it's all just because it's not there in real life doesn't mean, and you're not hallucinating, but it's in your head still.
Yeah.
And it's just the idea of the
It's like
part
you're replaying it over and over and over and over and over.
Yes, and
It's
it's like you,
yeah,
yes, and it's like, how can you focus on writing the article for a magazine when you're still hearing honk, 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 and then you're trying to take a deep breath, you're still inhaling and it's not just bad things. I mean, one of the things that I relive my happiest moments.
yeah,
It's like the most delicious meals. The
yeah,
music it's like everything but at the same time, it's like you talk about, you can't necessarily multitask. You can't focus on one thing because it's like if someone puts their mouth right up to your ears and starts talking on and on and on and on, well, you can't have your own thoughts. So
yeah,
when hearing conversations on it's as I said, it's kind of like, you know, when I go down, it's like I go downtown and come home, but downtown comes home with me.
yeah,
And it's a case of trying to do it. And just like I said, the idea of, going, if you go to mass early in the day, sometimes it all comes, you take it with you.
yeah,
And it's just sort of like the idea that if you didn't get a double whammy sucker punch, then you may get 2 hours later when you're at home washing berries for a meal, and all of a sudden, kaboom, it
yeah,
hits.
yeah. Exactly. I
And
remember like the one time I was at mass and I was just shaking like a leaf. I was just upset and I didn't know what was going on. And the lady's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Because it's like you don't want to tell people what you're going through because they'll think you're crazy. But this was all before knew what the was going on with
yeah.
before, and so
And
yeah,
yeah,
it's nice having tools now to help me, but like I can't use um like those headphones. I have to use like earplugs, but I have 24/7 ringing in my ears. And so for me to use earplugs sometimes it's worse. It makes that ringing louder. And so I have to like weigh the options. And so like if I'm in a grocery store, putting earplugs in when they have a loudspeaker on and the music and the machines, like all the machines that are holding the food, I can hear the lights buzzing, like sometimes that in that situation, it helps me calm down so intensely when I put them on. And then the ringing in my ears is like nothing compared to what I was going through. And then you know then move on to the next thing. But yeah, it is a lot to deal with going places. I think um going to church has always been a wonderful experience, like when nobody's around. So it's like I've always found like when the church is empty and I go in there to pray, that is when I'm most happiest. But I've been to some beautiful masses, like when some priests were getting ordained and like the music was just so intense and I was like crying because it was so beautiful. So I've had like the extreme overwhelm of like the negative side of it, but then I've been deeply like moved at the same time. So like at other times, like I've felt God's presence so deeply and like, and other people are like, when I talk to the people about it, they're like, "Well, I haven't had that experience. I've been Catholic my whole life." And it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, how can you not feel that? It's like so beautiful. And so
yeah.
I've had both the bad and the good, but the good is very intense sometimes that like I remember we had gone camping, some of my relatives and I, and we went to the Sunday mass, some random church nearby, and the priest was giving his homily and I just started crying. I was so filled with the spirit. I felt like knowing and I felt like understanding and like love, and it was just like such an intense feeling. And my cousin was like worried. She's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "It's good." Like it's like it's really good. Like I didn't know how to explain it, but you
Well,
know.
may I please, I didn't want to cut you off. It's just, I was so excited about, sometimes when I get excited, I cut people off, and I know that's very rude, and I didn't
Oh
want to
no,
show
it's okay.
that.
You didn't cut me off. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, you talk about something being so beautiful and being overwhelmed. This is actually a condition I heard about. Well, it started out once on a sitcom, and then I read about another book on art theft. But it's called Stendhal syndrome. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
It's basically a case of being overwhelmed by things of great beauty.
Hmm.
Like if you paintings,
Yeah.
sometimes it can be artwork, and I think it can apply to music as well. That's Stendhal. Well, if you could look, it's a real thing. It's based on the 19th century French author Stendhal, Stendhal. But
Okay.
this idea, when you're exposed to something like that, whether it's the architecture of a church or a cathedral, the sound of the music, everything. I think that, I mean, it's not, I think in some ways these autistic reactions may be a variant of Stendhal syndrome
Mm.
because people have been known to have actual heart attacks when looking at classical artwork, and sometimes just because overwhelmed by just the intense of it. And I
Yeah.
think that's a term that I bring up now. It's like a form of Stendhal syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that a lot. Just especially like that's why when I go to church, like especially my older parish, depending on who the musician was, like I would either have a very deeply moving experience and be in a deep prayer state, or I would be totally distracted and like not, it just would be like I would work so hard to just try to have a prayerful experience, but like the other people that would be there, it would just be like flooded, like instantly at prayer and just so happy. And yeah, I think, yeah, music definitely and art and yeah, I definitely have that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's something because I really just made the connection just now
Hmm.
we're talking about, it, and I just thought this is the first time I've ever mentioned Stendhal syndrome. I think of anybody, but I think it's something to look into because
Mhm.
I think it's, when people say, they said, well, why, enough talking about this. I want answers. I mean, how do I deal with this? And this, because answer like, I wish I did, because, I went from having what I'd call, in a scale of 1 to 100, an average day, 7 years ago, my reactions might be 50 to 60
Mm.
high. Now almost always at least 80 and sometimes 100 in
Yeah.
that window. When I leave, not just leaving the house, but the idea of walking in the garden, going down to take the garbage can to the curb, and
Mhm.
hearing, horns honking in the background, or
Yeah.
having a rabbit duck out of the bushes next to you and run past you. Every stimulation, dealing with it just sets you off in ways you can't expect. And yes, we're focusing talking about church, but I think it's all connected.
Yes,
So,
it is. Yeah.
but it's like one of the other things I can control at least is clothing. I mean, and there are I cannot take certain fabrics or
Mhm.
colors. And the
Yeah.
thing is, I have when I wear some clothes, I get the memories that I had when wearing them in the past.
Yeah,
So
I actually I had to get rid of some clothes because they had bad memories associated to them, and so I had to actually get rid of like a lot of clothes because it was all associated during a time frame that that like I just had to because I didn't want to keep reliving all of that over and over and over. So I
exactly.
understand that. Yeah.
I mean, because yeah, I mean, I have two coats that I've worn since high school. They're very well made. And so, and I love them, but and sometimes when I wear them, they're very comforting, and other times it's just overwhelming. So
Yeah.
like I said, I have to be careful. I've always been against things that I don't need, many clothes, but now I've been experimenting with different colors, textures, the fabrics, and sometimes, it's sort of thing that people think, well, what's, this is a bit maybe but it depends on the situation.
Yeah, it does.
Sometimes what I need is way too casual, or they think like, and people think you're wearing that, or
Yeah,
that's a bold choice.
yeah,
It's a case of sometimes, if I'm going, there's so much going on in my brain, so many reactions. I just think to myself, I have no room in my brain for caring about what other people think.
yeah,
So if somebody else wants to play fashion police on me, it's like I have to. I said like your opinion means nothing to me.
yeah. I do for me, like I have fibromyalgia as well, and so for me, like I cannot wear certain clothing because either it's too tight or it hurts me, and so it is an autism thing. I also am ADHD, so I have like all three, which, like you cut the tags off your shirt, and if you have to wear something inside out, sometimes you have to do that. And, you just have to do what you have to do to be comfortable so that you can focus on what's important. Because, your clothes are important, but like you said, it's like it doesn't matter if you're wearing clothing, that's what's important. So like it doesn't matter if it meets the code of ethics or I mean like if it doesn't matter if it meets the dress code in the sense that it's fashionable or fancy. It's like you need to be comfortable so you can be fully present as best you can be, with all that we're dealing with. And so, yeah, I don't think um, people understand sometimes. So,
Uh, I
you
think
know,
so because I think one of the biggest issues facing people with autism is that I think people will confuse, call it eccentricity or quirkiness or difficulty or just plain stubbornness, but it's I think it's the main difference, the idea of there's a big difference between a kid having a tantrum because he didn't get what he wants and a kid having a meltdown because he is just short-circuiting.
yeah,
And so I think that I know I know we're running low on time, so I was just thinking if we could move into sort of a wrap up at this point,
sure.
if that's okay with you. But because I think when talking about this a long time can be overwhelming in itself. So I think
Yeah,
we've been going on about this for a while, and I've been going into incredible details, going into, not incredible, but I mean intense details and reliving things that are difficult for me. And I think for me to remain focused and clear, and I just, I figure, well, 80 minutes is a bit much, pushing it a bit for me. So
yeah,
I
yeah, me too. So
but
I'm
but
grateful we had this time together though, and
yeah, but
um, I think it
but
was great that you explained things really well for people to
I
understand.
hope so, because I can never be sure what I say is replicates something effectively in someone else's mind. But
Yeah,
it's just the idea, we talk about mass, and when you do the televised mass, stream it. You can stop it sometimes 5, 10 minutes because it gets to be too much for me. Other people, you simply cannot take more than 5 minutes at a time. You can't. It's like when you're at the act physically there, you can't say after 5 minutes, hold that thought right there, Father, and I'm going to take a 5-minute walk outside and we'll get back in a moment.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, I know. I do have to pause, or sometimes I'll go to mass at like midnight or, whatever it is, whatever time of day I need. But I do attend mass online, and I really enjoy going to masses like overseas at different places, because a lot of them have English masses, and um, for me, India is my favorite. They have beautiful masses, and I feel the most spiritually moving experiences when I go to their masses. Like today, I went to Valankani, the shrine where the Blessed Mother appeared, and that was beautiful mass. And sometimes I go to Canada, sometimes the Philippines, so I try to go to different masses all over the place. Um, it's fun and it makes it more exciting because then you get different homilies. You don't get the same thing over and over. Like, if you go to a local parish, a lot of times if the priest is there long, he says the same things over and over. You know what he's gonna say. And it's nice to get some variety and having the ability to pause or if sometimes when someone's singing, I'll like put it on mute because I know the song and I'll just sing it myself. And
Mhm.
then when they're done, then I'll put it back on because sometimes like their pitch isn't, it causes me struggles. So, you have to do what you have to do. But yeah, I enjoy going to online masses. But thanks again for being with me
Oh,
for this long talk. I think you had a lot
thank
of things that would help people understand
and
that.
yeah, the one last point I had that helps me, the idea of support group. Usually my mother or my godmother, the idea of being able to go with someone else, because I've find it harder and harder when I'm on my own, but the idea of having just someone I totally trust or am comfortable with, and there aren't many people like that being there, it really helps. But
Yes, I totally agree. Yes. Yeah, I find that too, that having someone you feel totally comfortable with to go to mass with or anywhere else really, that it gives you that safety net you need in case something happens. You have someone there that understands.
uh-huh. So yeah, sometimes you just need help, getting out quickly, or
Yeah.
just hope that, anything that we talk about here can be of help to other people. Just because I think these are things that people don't want to talk about because it's embarrassing and it's deeply personal.
Yeah.
And I just found that sometimes, I mean, people talk about, what can I do to help? And sometimes I think that thing that we can't need but don't get is knowing that other people are going through something incredibly similar.
Yeah.
And so I figure I'm going to be paying for this for hours later after this. No, please don't take this in a bad way, but it's
Yeah.
just the overstimulation of talking about this. I'm,
Yeah.
it's just a case of I just hope, if more people listen to this and get something good out of this, people with autism or people who love them, and
Yeah.
get a better idea of what people they know are going through. And once again, autism is a very broad spectrum. What
Yeah.
going through is maybe incredibly different from what someone else, so don't think one size does not fit all. And I just
Right.
hope that if people can take what I say and adjust it to their own needs and
Yes.
experiences. But it's
Uh,
just, I figure the best thing to do, I mean, there isn't a pill, there isn't a special kind of therapy. This
mm,
is just, I think, the best weapon or medicine we may have at our disposal is just talking about the idea of personal experience, qualitative over quantitative. Sometimes information can be just the idea of this is maybe critical. And so, sometimes just, hoping what I say helps someone else. So
it
thank
will.
you so
Thank you so
much.
much. Yeah, thank you. It was great talking with you and
Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.
thanks, you too. God bless you.
God bless.